All right, we're back. I have some announcements. The last day to register to vote in the presidential primary election is tomorrow by 8 p.m. Now, nomination papers for annual town elections are now available. For more details, please visit the clerk's page of the town website. There's online enrollment for the Grafton Energy Choice Program. See the website www.masspowerchoice.com, select Grafton and click Enroll Online, and then fill out the form. So those are our announcements tonight. Is there any public comments?
Sitaraman Ganesan, 28 Seaver Farm Lane, South Grafton, MA 01560. On November 5th, I was here last year asking, this is regarding the safety issue on Seaver Farm Lane, the basketball hoop. I'm here to follow up on that. Did we get any feedback from the legal counsel?
Well, we've had some conversations with the owner.
Yeah,
Should
yep,
we
we
put-
have, and, you know, I think we were trying to treat it as a neighborhood issue and try to let the neighborhood kind of resolve the matter on its own without us being heavy-handed and have it removed.
But you said you're going to ask the legal counsel, Ginny Kramer,
Yeah,
right?
Ginny Kramer, yeah?
Yeah, do you try to?
Yeah, we talked about it, and people talked about an attractive nuisance and what the liability would be. You know, as she always says, anybody can sue anybody for any reason at any time, you know. There hasn't been a problem. It's been a good use of the space, if you will, and it gives
I mean-
kids an outlet. And I think that's been kind of like the message that we've gotten.
No, I get that, but I just would like to know what that town,
Well, town council just advises the board and myself on matters of liability to the town. She's not gonna tell us you should or you shouldn't do something.
okay.
But this discussion, should we put it on an agenda at some time, or,
Yeah, that might make sense.
because if we're starting to,
Yeah, I forgot the protocol. I apologize.
yeah, because it's a public
I-
comment.
I mean, if you guys can come up, I mean, if town council, if they can decide, if the select board can decide, I'll take that.
Okay.
And I have another question regarding the budget. The school, how we fund the school.
Well, we're gonna have a whole discussion on the budget.
Okay.
So usually the public comment is for things that, we're not going to talk about later in the agenda. So if it's something that's gonna fall into our budget discussion, if you can wait and ask
Sure.
that question during our budget discussion, but just, when it kinda comes up.
Not a problem.
And again, we're not talking primarily about the school budget tonight, because we're primarily talking about the town budget. Of course, the school budget is part of the town budget, so there's definitely overlap, but, school committee, they're actually having a meeting upstairs right now too, so.
Not a problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, schedule, vote to allow the chair to sign contract with Maintenance Technology for the vehicle wash system for the new DPW facility.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I motion that the board vote to allow the chair to sign a contract for the maintenance technology for the purpose of installation of a new vehicle wash system for the new public works facility in the amount of $71,762.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, just for all those of you who are at home watching what is a vehicle wash system, so this is part of the new DPW facility, and part of the reason why this was put in was to extend the life of our fleet vehicles that go out and are exposed to road salts, for lack of better words, and to keep them in better working condition to prevent corrosion. So this is state-of-the-art system, supposed to be very eco-friendly, supposed to use minimal water. But anyway, just so people are wondering, what is a vehicle wash system? That's what it's for. Thank you.
Right, I have a motion and I heard a second. Yep, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Next on the agenda is the budget discussion. So, let's see, I'm sorry, I have so many papers. So this is the primary reason for us meeting tonight, and I want to thank all the department heads that did come out tonight. We really appreciate that. Tim and I had been talking this week. We wanted to make sure that everybody's questions were answered. And so we went back and forth on whether or not to bring all of you out tonight. And just for transparency and to give you the opportunity to answer questions about your own budgets. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming. And we've gotten a lot of questions ahead of time. I don't know, Becca, did you want to start with the main question that we've been asked is, what reductions have we made already? Did you want to start with that? And then we can,
This work for you, or do you know what works or not?
It's
Did you
mine,
already
it's
try it?
mine, yeah, it
All
is.
right, good.
Should we skip ahead to these appointments if
Oh.
anyone's here, just because?
Yeah, that way we can roll.
oh, are they
Yeah.
here? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't even see those. Yes, great idea. I'm sorry, can we pause
Yeah, of
just for a
course.
second? We do have some town administrator appointments, if we can do those quickly so that the folks that are here don't
Yeah, there are
necessarily.
3 appointments, 3 different stations for the fire department, the recommendation of the fire chief, and we just look for affirmation from the board to make those appointments.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Carlson?
I move the board vote to affirm the town administrator's appointment of Sarah Bianco to the Grafton Fire Department as an auxiliary recruit firefighter assigned to Station 3.
Second.
A motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I motion that the select board vote to affirm the town administrator's appointment of Brandon Dion to the Grafton Fire Department as an auxiliary recruit firefighter assigned to Station 1.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I move the board vote to affirm the town administrator's appointment of Robert Holmes to the Grafton Fire Department as an auxiliary recruit firefighter assigned to Station 2.
Second.
A motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. Thanks, Becca, for,
Yeah.
so, oh, nobody got up and left, so that's good. Everybody is here for budget.
One of the questions that we've been asked a few times by a few different stakeholders is what steps has the town side taken to try to reduce the ask in FY21 from the line item budgets. So I've gone through and just made a list. All the way on the left, you'll see the department, the request that was made, and then the amount that it was funded at, and then any notes related to the difference in what was requested and what was funded. So I can go through each one. A lot of them are, small, a lot of training that people requested to attend that won't be funded in 21. Office supplies, some of the bigger things, just to point out, in MIS-GIS, we were requesting to purchase a new badge maker. Employees have badges that they wear, and for those who swipe in, they're used to swipe. Our badge maker has been down. We've been using the police department badge maker. We were proposing to fund one for up here, so we don't have to run down to the police department and use their badge maker when we need to make a new badge. That got cut. And then also, we pay AppGeo, who's a consultant, to help us make maps. We reduced that budget by $4,000, so, fewer maps, fewer projects will be undertaken in FY21 in the planning department. Another big one is conservation. In the past, we have contracted out with service to maintain a lot of our conservation land. In FY21, we are proposing to purchase a new mower using cemetery perpetual care funds. And then our internal staff will use that new mower to mow that conservation land that we were previously contracting out. So that's where you see that jump in conservation.
And we have had grants in the past to do that mowing, but those grants have expired. That's why we had to pick it up in the budget.
Planning department is the other big one. A couple things have happened. We've hired on a new planner at a lower rate than what Joe was making. Joe, when he was here, he had made a request for an additional staff planner to be brought on in '21 because of the level of work, in the amount of work in that office. There are a lot of different projects going on. That obviously is not being funded. We have offset the assistant planner salary using the sustainability revolving fund. So that's the account that the adder money with the aggregation plan goes into a revolving account. Per the DPU, you can use a small portion of that for administrative costs. So we're proposing that that staff will take that on. It's a good marriage with the Green Communities Grant to sort of oversee that program. So that offsets post salary, and then professional and technical was also reduced in the planning department. Building maintenance reduced for the municipal center. We proposed to do a number of projects around the building. Some new carpets. We wanted to start taking out the lockers that are in this building and putting up just a regular wall. We're not going to do that in FY21. Unclassified, that's a big one. That's the renewal for the health insurance. So we were carrying 8%. We did not get an 8% renewal. We got 0%, so that saved us about $300,000. We are carrying 1.5% in that line, which is about $70,000 to account for any movement of plans, and then also the reimbursements that we have to provide through the HRA agreements in the PEC, which was signed back when we joined the GIC. Police department. The police chief requested 2 new cars. Those are not being funded. A bunch of other requests were also reduced. Repair and maintenance budget, rental and lease for copiers budget, vehicular supplies budget was reduced, and that's just to balance the budget. A lot of training in the fire department, based upon the fact that we're hoping to bring on a fire chief for the start of FY21. We did reduce that budget, and we're kind of hoping that as that chief comes on board, that person will be able to take a look at the department, what there is for training, develop a plan, and then in FY22, make a recommendation as to how to move forward. Right now, that training budget often is not spent down at the end of the fiscal year, which is why we're not funding it in FY21.
Which, to note, would be less money to go into free cash the next year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. A lot of these conference seminar lines, again, the inspector of buildings requested to go to the International Council.
Code Council.
Yeah, international. It's like their annual conference that is not going to be funded in FY21. Hours for inspectors were reduced. A lot of this is based on historical trends. So we don't think there's going to be anything catastrophic happening in FY21, but again, it's based on need. So if we, get a request for a lot of plumbing inspections or gas inspections, we'll have to make adjustments in FY21 if we don't have enough in those lines. Supplies, office equipment, library is a big one. Beth and I and Tim sat down and went through her staffing budget a couple times. She's made a lot of reductions from what she initially requested. There are still 2 new people in this budget coming on in April of FY21 when we hope the new building will open. One of them is a custodial staff, and one of them is a circulation staff. Is that right? Yeah. So she can answer, more specific questions if you have specific questions around that. But those 2 people are still in the 21 budget for those 3 months, April to June. And then recreation, Jen would like to have a full-time person in that department. Obviously, there's definitely the work and the programming that warrants it. We didn't fund the full-time position. We funded a part-time position, and we're offsetting it with a transfer from her revolving accounts. So that's sort of a snapshot of all the lines that were reduced from the requests It totals 568,122. So,
So to be clear, there are no positions, full-time positions that existed in the FY '20 budget that are going to be eliminated as a result of the reductions. We're just not going to add in a way we wanted to.
That's correct. The police chief wanted one that didn't get funded. That was the only one that was asked for that didn't get funded, correct? The detective?
yes, but that's not even in the request.
Yeah, it was, well,
That's in the long range.
yeah, in the
We
operational
look
plan.
at, like, if we were to do an override, these are the things that we should have and that we would want to fund, and that's where you see the request for the detective.
Can you go back when I thought I had a question? I can't remember what it was now. Oh, the sustainability revolving account. I had a question generally speaking about revolving accounts, but I hadn't heard of this one. What is this revolving account funded by?
The adder.
What's adder?
So, do you want
Yeah, when we did the energy aggregation plan, the town voted to allow an adder, which is 0.001 cent per kilowatt,
I remember.
for administering programs that save those ratepayers money in electricity by energy conservation measures and training for those folks.
What's present? How much is presently in the adder account?
We've gotten one check.
$8,000? We just started collecting the funding in November.
I think
Okay.
it's 60,000 annually.
DPU.
Gotcha. So we're anticipating 60,000 annually.
Yeah, based on the number of kilowatts that people have used historically. And I don't know if we shared this at the last meeting. Did we share the $2.2 million story? Because we don't promote it quite enough. But the whole energy aggregation plan in totality from the start of it to now, if you compared the rate that we pay per kilowatt versus what people would have paid in National Grid, the community, both businesses and residential, it's a $2.2 million savings cumulatively for all of us who live here versus just being on our own with National Grid. So I think it's a great thing, and we did math a long time ago, the first and second year, looking at the cost savings, $30 a month for an individual house versus what that tax impact is, and it was a wash. I didn't do that extrapolating it out to year 3 of the program, but I'm sure we'd be pretty close to it. So I think that's just a good thing that the board and even town meeting, they had a vote to authorize it. That's a big thing and a big value add that we provide.
How long's that contract?
You know that better than I do. I think there's 1 year left.
Yeah, signed a 36-month contract in 2018, October of 2018.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
And we hedged out, my contemporaries in other communities signed a 24-month contract. I signed 36. They're paying more in their third year, which is their new 1 year, than we're paying in our third. So maybe I got lucky, I don't know. But we did some math and we figured we'd go for the 36 months, which ended up saving us more than what other people are paying.
Any other questions?
I
on
do.
this?
Can you go to the next slide, Becca? My question is on the inspections positions, building, gas, plumbing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's one of the few town departments that's fully funded by just its fees alone, correct?
Yeah, the building department,
Yeah, they
certainly,
bring
the
in
building
more
department
money
fees
than they
pay.
spend.
Yep.
They do. And what impact to homeowners or businesses in Grafton would the reduction of hours reduced for gas and plumbing?
They wouldn't
anyone
get
done
paid,
an
they get
impact study?
paid per inspection?
No, I'm talking about with the reduced hours of those inspectors that are available for those.
Yes.
What
So-
is the impact to the community with those reductions?
So we're not anticipating that there's going to be an impact. Based on the historical spend, we still think what we're funding here will adequately cover what we've seen in the last 2 years of inspections for permitting. If there was a huge bump, we got a big boom in applications in FY21, yeah, we'd be looking at probably, instead of telling homeowners, you have to wait 3 months to get your plumbing inspection, we'd be in October trying to make an adjustment or going to finance committee and saying we need you to transfer money from the reserve account so that we can provide homeowners with inspections.
But those fees for those inspections are gonna cover that cost. So we would add the revenue line, we would increase the revenue line in October for raise and appropriate. and increase that line item.
But haven't you already accounted for those fees coming in the budget?
But if the boom happens,
But if
those
the-
fees are
if
gonna
we-
go up.
if- Yeah,
Okay.
So we're keeping the fee structure level, because you haven't increased them, and based on what the need for inspections have been to date, funding at that level will be sufficient.
So the way I'm understanding this is that you would go in October and basically just ask for an adjustment, but you wouldn't be going after tax base, you'd be going for the fees to offset the increase in expense.
Yeah, I mean, it's all
Yeah.
raise and appropriate for
I
the sake
understand,
of.
yeah,
They
that's what they
allocate
call
the
it,
money,
but that,
yeah.
but the pot of money where you're getting that from.
Correct.
would be-
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right,
So I don't know, I mean, Bob is here, I dragged him out, so did we do that justice in relative to the
No, that's correct.
inspections? Okay.
Correct.
all right. So does anybody, I guess we'll just start with questions. Does anybody have any questions for Tim and Beth about the budget?
Well, I sent mine along and
Oh.
wanted to ask about
Okay,
what you've been able to provide to alleviate some of the budget for the school department.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was the health insurance reduction from our initial assumption that it would be an 8% increase. So when that came out at zero, most of the 230 of that savings, if you will, went to fund the school department. So their numbers increased. They have a meeting tonight. They canceled their public hearing on the budget until the 25th. So I think they're trying to decide how that 230 impacts their operations going forward. So it's kind of tough. We're having a half conversation because we just don't know what that impact is to them. I'm sure they're still going to have an issue. We've talked to the superintendent about using the stabilization account for special ed that you approved 2 years ago. There's 200,000 and change in there. You're supposed to use in an emergency. You do have cost increasing in special ed that I think you could make the justification for it to use to offset those costs. Other reductions that we can cut, come up with, if the goal was to fund, 20% of what the delta is now, so we think the delta now is 590 from the request. So the request was for 2.1 million, they got 1.5, so we need to find 600,000, give or take. After we've, given up that perceived increase in health insurance. So how much of that should we be striving for? And how much can we really make happen? 2 years ago, we went to a model, or maybe it was 3 budget cycles ago, with Nelson Park and Library, where we went to them and said, you have trust fund money, we're gonna use that, we're not gonna use general fund money. Caused a lot of heartburn for folks. We ended up making an adjustment in October because we had new growth to justify it. So those are small things. That's a $30,000 type fix that we could do. I've talked to this board about using Chapter 90 money for operations inside of DPW to offset those costs. So things like line painting or guardrails that we budget for because we want to replace those things and paint every year, we could make an application to Chapter 90. Of course, we already have most of Chapter 90 money plugged in for different projects, from Main Street to Stowe Road and that culvert replacement, which is going to cost a fortune. But if you got super desperate and wanted to do something, you could make adjustments inside of DPW's operational line and offset it with Chapter 90. And all these things they're broad-based things. There's no finite how much you could do. And, that particular point has been kicked around internally with staff, but nothing definitive put around how much that could yield. The fire department equipment for turnout gear, you need to change out turnout gear every 10 years. The chief's been very aggressive of making sure that turnout gear gets changed. So that's a $92,000 cost. That's in the operating budget now, in the fire department's budget as an operating cost. We could, if we chose to, use one-time money or free cash to fund that. So that could offset another $92,000. So there's things like that if we wanted to go through and make some philosophical decisions about what we want to make adjustments to get more money to another place, we could do that. I just don't know what I'm shooting for. Trash is another thing. We have $450,000 in revenue from trash bags, which almost offsets the cost of E.L. Harvey's contract. So if you wanted to toy with the idea of having a subscription service for residents and us being out of the trash business, there might be a $300,000 swing if you didn't provide that service. I'm not advocating for any of these pieces. I'm just telling you those are the things that are big ticket items that might make an adjustment worthwhile to consider.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Can you put together a list of those levers that we could pull? And starting with the, I guess, the highest ticket items, or maybe putting not just the dollar amount, but the impact it could have if we were to do some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, other
mean,
than,
it's
other than what I've
articulated.
just covered, I don't think there's
Many
not
more.
much else.
You want me to put it up?
Yeah, we have a chart that displays some of what we think the cost savings would be for each. There you go. Each of the items that I just covered. Just why that's coming up, the trash thing is kind of touchy, because we have a contract with Wheelabrator. It was a long-term contract to burn our trash in Millbury. The original contract talked about a minimum tonnage that the town would have to provide them. When we did a renewal with them in 2017, it's not clear to me if there was holdover language from that contract that holds us to that. So I'd need to figure out what that liability would be. And then E.L. Harvey's contract expires in 2021. So there's a year left, starting July 2020 to June 30, 2021. So we'd have to figure out how we get out of that if we were to do that. But these are the 8 levers, if you will, to get us maybe through a particular hump, if you will. So Nelson Park, as we've done, as I mentioned, Highway Department, those ticket items like I've talked about, line painting, guardrails and so forth, could be Chapter 90. It'd have to be an application that the board applies for to Chapter 90, get approved, and then you can start to spend. Sanitation, parks and cemetery, there's 2 seasonal positions that they have every year. It's $12,000. We would not cut as much grass. That's kind of the impact. The library, limiting those 2 positions for the final quarter in fiscal '21. Savings is $15,000. The economic development coordinator position, we've had that in the budget, out of the budget, in the budget. It's in the budget again. You could go back to the second model and go fund that with one-time revenues for that $30,000. And then the fire department into equipment with one-time funding. So that's the list that we think is reasonable to look at.
Just so the public knows, when you look at this list, these are all not great options, in my opinion anyway. What you're looking at here is a reduction in being able to deal with your operating expenses. You're putting off capital. And that means, so to the extent that you're ignoring a road or you're ignoring painting on a road, these things get worse over time and they get more expensive over time. So you're kicking the can down the road. So 5 years from now, you're paying for the cost savings that you would be paying now if you address the problem now. And this really would be a Band-Aid approach to get us to a year from now when the discussion doesn't go away and the reductions get worse.
Any follow-up questions?
No, thank you.
Peter, I thought I saw you have a question.
No, he answered it actually. With,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Chapter 90 is blank because we just don't have a good feel for what they would cover if you made application for it. And my staff wants to kill me sitting out there that I didn't have that lengthy conversation with, so,
Paul, would you like to come up and say anything?
no.
No.
I'd rather wait till tomorrow.
All right. Any other questions?
Anyone else? Because I have a few.
No, go
Mine are
ahead.
answered. I may have more, but.
All right. So specifically concerning the town budget, I was looking on page 10, and I just had a couple of questions about, this is the operating budget summary, and you've got revenue code descriptions in here.
Yep.
I know in the budget, we're looking at projected $360,000 for cannabis sales under our host community agreements, as well as $130,000 to pay for the new full-time fire chief from the SAFER grant. But I don't know, are those 2 revenue items included in the summary on page 10?
Yeah.
Okay, under what revenue code description could I find those?
I think they're under fees. Let me pull it up. and look
Okay.
at it.
You want to just put that on the screen so people can see it too?
Yeah.
I think don't you have a grants line right there?
What?
I can't see it. I was gonna pretend I could see it. While looking at it.
So I'm pretty sure that the I don't know why it's not coming up right now. The cannabis is in the fees line. So you see it goes from 194 403 and 20 to 564 403. I want to say that the grant money is in miscellaneous non-recurring, so that goes from 85 to 215. Can't really see that.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty good.
All right, that actually answers another question I had, which is how was that money going from 85 to 215? So that's the fire chief money. Okay. And then our investment income, what is that comprised of?
You had a lot of borrowings in the past 2 years for 2 projects, so we have more money to earn more interest on. So in our projections going out beyond 21, that number actually tapers back down. But because you have the ability to earn interest on those borrowings, as long as you don't compete with IRS rules, that's what that increase in investment income is.
Okay. All right, and then specifically for the $360,000 in cannabis, I'm a little bit nervous about this projection. We were hoping by now, for instance, that UPS, when they bought that parcel, would have come online,
Yep.
and that would have really helped us out this year. That didn't happen. And again, for the public's benefit, there's only so much the town can do to promote commercial growth. If we could make it happen, it would happen, but we can't, and we're at the mercy of the market a lot of the times, what different private entities want to do. And in this case, we're at the mercy of not only what the recreational marijuana retailers will do, but also what the state will do. We don't know when the CCC is going to actually issue anybody a license to sell. So now it's February of 2020. Have we had any indication from the CCC that licenses to sell are going to be issued anytime soon?
Not from the CCC, no, but from 2 of the applicants that you have host agreements with. One is Resonate, Peter DeCaro, putting the water line across Route 30 now, is before planning for the site itself, so that's underway. So infrastructure inside that building, renovations are happening. MJ Market, I sent Brian Foley a text today, and he responded that their application is to CCC, and I encouraged him to apply to planning straight away so they can start a dual process.
Yeah, I would imagine, because the CCC, one of their requirements in the 3rd phase of the application process is the CCC then reviews their plans for their facility, because obviously they're really interested in safety, right? And because it's a cash business, and they have to be. Their approval can include not only review of plans, but actually a review of a physical facility, which is wide open, right? You can come up with plans right now today about what you want your facility to be, but if they're going to wait and say, all right, now we want to see it, and particularly in that site where there are other private entities there, I'm a little bit worried that they're not going to get there by FY21. And then on the SAFER grant, I had questions about what are the criteria for issuance of the grant, and do we meet that criteria?
Well, we're going to go with MRI to make the application since they did the study for staffing. So there's a lot of initiative we have to put forward to show, hey, we've been a volunteer department, we've never had full-time professional management. I think that's going to go a long way. Then I don't think they're going to look at social economic information as much as they will. Everybody surrounding us has some full-time semblance of a department. That's going to be the thing that we push and we promote.
Okay.
So I can't tell you, at a confidence interval of 80%, we're going to get it funded because we meet these 6 criteria. It just doesn't. Again, it's more of an art with that application, and that's why we're contracting that out to MRI.
Do you know when we'll know?
No, it just started to get the DUNS number and all the account information to get into the application packet. I did have an email that told me what the date was for when the applications were due, but I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can get it.
Okay. I guess my concern is, what's our backup plan if we don't get these things? If the 360 from the cannabis doesn't materialize, and I hope it does, and the 130 grant doesn't materialize, that's a $490,000 potential liability. So that, you know, we whittled it down to a $500,000 gap with the health insurance, but now, you know, potentially could be looking at something back up towards seven figures. Do we have a backup plan for how we're gonna fund a fire chief if this doesn't materialize?
No, we're probably not gonna fund it at all.
Okay.
We're just gonna wait another year to see if it gets better, or if we get a second opportunity at the grant, we'll get the grant.
Okay.
I mean, Mickey's here, he's here for the duration until his retirement, so he's been great, and he knows we're trying to transition with him on board until we bring the new person on and keep them on board until he retires. It's an interesting arrangement, but we all know we need to do things a little bit different than you normally would in replacing someone.
All right.
I just want to, just one comment. The UPS facility, even though it has not, moved forward, Mary Oliver has been doing a great job with assessing the properties in town. So we did, the assessed value went from 750 when they purchased it to 3 million. So there is an increase in taxes. It's certainly not the building of a facility. It's not that increase, but there's an increase to that.
Yeah, in terms of the baseline value, and there's nuance to that. I mean, Ed's right that we wanted them here.
Yeah.
But you gotta remember, in principle, we had town meeting approve a concept relative to a TIF agreement where they would, on the incremental value increase from that 752 at the time to the 3 million now, they would pay zero for 100% exempt for the first year.
Right.
Then it changed. You haven't signed an agreement yet, so I want to use this time to, maybe UPS is listening, as leverage to come in and have that negotiation with the board to figure out, is it still going to be 100% in year one? It certainly would have been 2 years ago. but
Right.
Is it going to be that same model? Because all you've been authorized by town meeting to do is to enter into a negotiation. Nothing's been solidified.
Okay.
So if they were to come and you didn't want to do 100, you still have that flexibility.
All right, so moving on down through my list of questions, I promise I won't take too long. But page 12, can we get FinCom on this chart? It's always sort of bothered me that FinCom is nowhere on this organizational chart.
Sure. Well, I don't know,
The
can we
appointed,
fit
not
one more?
elected.
Yeah, they're appointed by the moderator.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still.
Oh, I'm going the wrong way.
Yeah, if we can get it on there, we will. That was one of the toughest charts we had to build.
Let's see.
If you send it to me, I'll fix the alignment. Sorry, my OCD's kicking in.
Okay, so I was just going through budget table down to page 15, and I had a question about specific cost increases. So I think I want to start with recreation. We have a nope, I'm on the wrong page again. Sorry, everyone. So recreation, we've got a cost increase on that. What? Becca, can you point me to the page for this?
Page 20.
Page 20?
Yeah.
Nah, but that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for expenditures
Oh.
overview, page 37.
Okay.
Sorry
You're
about
way
that.
ahead of me. 37.
Yes,
All right.
account 630, is that the one he wants?
Are you looking at
Recreation?
Yeah, I went to, sorry, I jumped ahead to page 38 for expenditures overview. Sorry, I should have tabbed my own notes. So we've got a culture and recreation percentage increase of 7.9%. Part of that is funding,
It's minimum wage increase, is it not? Is that right? The minimum wage increase, then we had to do that, but
Oh.
you can answer those if you want to.
yeah, what are we looking at there if we have department heads here in the room tonight?
I mean, you're looking at I don't know what specific number you're looking at, but, or what percent I am of that whole culture
Yeah,
and recreation budget.
Culture and rec includes, is library and recreation together.
Okay. Probably the easiest
But
way
I
to
also
do it.
meant to,
So just go to her detail, right?
Yeah, let's go down to
That's
detail.
because I also think that percent, and I think I've been meaning to determine what it is without the additional position in there. So it's showing an increase, for the additional position, but we're really funding that through revolving funds, so it's
Right.
not,
Right.
that overall number that that much. But yeah, it's mainly due to 2 minimum wage increases for seasonal staff during the course of that fiscal year. Minimum wage is going up over 6% for the, the next, an average 6% over the next two shifts. And so that's the main portion of that. Main expense line is pretty level. It's personnel.
Okay. I think that was my question concerning that. Thank you.
Okay.
And then, under unclassified, Tim, you had, there was a percentage increase, or there was a dollar figure added for the pension contribution, but I was wondering if there was a associated percentage increase off of that. So the town's pension contribution to WRRS increased 195,525. Do you know what that was over the prior year?
Oh, I have 17.
So in FY '20, it was like 11%, so it actually went down a tiny bit, percentage-wise.
Okay.
I think in '20, it was like 200,000 and change. Yeah, does that sound right to you? Yeah, okay. So it did
Amy,
go
would you
down.
know that? Would you know that percent?
Yeah.
You don't think you think it's in your notes in unclassified of what that increase jump was?
Not from 19 to
Oh,
20.
no, I thought I was trying to do 20.
No, I know it went down in 21. It will go down in 21,
Okay.
by like a percentage point.
And my next question was about page 47, performance measures and performance management. This particular entry surprised me a little bit because when we talk about performance measures and performance management, traditionally what I think of is efficiencies and how we're measuring data in our performance of services for the town. But in this particular page, we talk a lot about open space and recreation plan. And I looked online and I couldn't find it. The one I found online was from 2007. So if somebody could just forward me a link, I'm sure it's there someplace, but
Well, you have
not.
to adopt
It's
it.
a draft.
It's
Okay.
still in process.
Zero
Okay.
percent, yeah.
Just some of the language in here, I'm not sure is quite accurate yet from where I'm sitting. So I just had a question about it. As a result of these discussions and surveys, they're talking about the open space and recreation plan, the process they went through. It became clear that the town should prioritize improving walking through comprehensive sidewalk plans, biking, hiking connections. I'm sure all that's true. But when we use the term prioritize, I'm wondering, well, what are we prioritizing it over? Because obviously it's a zero-sum game here. We've got a capital list that is $20 million long. We put a little bit less than $1 million, or somewhere around $1 million toward it every year. So what are we going for with the statement on page 47? I'm just wondering what the thought process was.
I think we're trying to share well, two things, right? When we did the GFOA budgeting award, they talked about performance measures and engaging the community in what its goals are. So we have a snapshot of what all that survey data came back with for the open space and rec plan. So we inserted that in there.
Okay. Who did the survey on that?
Oh, who's doing it, right? Is it still?
CMRCP
Yeah.
is the consultant,
Okay.
and there's a committee.
And it's on Joe's desk, on Chris's desk now, so it's on the radar.
Okay.
But part of it, I think, one of the main purposes to do this plan is to be able to apply for grants for specific things,
Sure.
especially in recreation and open space. It gives us the ability to apply for monies outside of our operating budget to complete, goals that
Well,
are
we can't
identified.
apply without that
Right.
study.
Right.
Just as a point, the budget does happen to call out the open space and rec plan because that was a more recent example of a time when we've gone out to the community, asked for input, and then sort of tried to use that input to inform our goals and decision-making going forward, which is sort of the whole idea. I sort of imagine that in future budget cycles, if we do invest in things like the voting software that we've been looking into, those are the same types of performance measures and initiatives that we'll take to ask people, what do you want? What do you see as important? We'll gather that info, and then you as a board and Tim and I will use that to inform how we, how you make policy, how we define goals. And that's sort of the idea, the concept that GFOA pushed us towards, and then we incorporated into the budget.
Sure. No, I understand that. I just want to make sure that what we're we're not indicating to the public that we're pivoting from one priority to another, or we're directing funds from one thing to another.
Sure.
But this is a data point
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
what we've been doing to
Yes.
reach out to the community. Again, to everybody within the sound of my voice, just understand that it's really hard to engage the community and determine what it, as a whole, wants to do. Because if you ask 20,000 people, you get 20,000 different opinions. I look out in the room, the people here, I know all you people. Most of you I've met in the municipal center, and you come to these meetings all the time. But there are some people out there that have completely different priorities, and they're really difficult to reach. So coming up with, what they want to see happen in the community is really difficult.
I don't know if I can just, I don't want to speak
Sure.
out guys' context out of what you're reading in there, but I think maybe what the interpretation is that's a priority amongst that plan.
Sure.
So not like,
A
the overall.
community-wide.
Yeah, but as part of the open space plan, what we're recognizing as a priority for
Gotcha.
that specific.
That makes sense. Thank you. All right, and then I was moving into specific line items. So on the select board, we're looking at a 15.4% increase.
Page, what page?
Page 53.
We can do word search, huh?
It's just, I'm getting there. Select board's in this,
Where are you trying to go? Just
right here.
Oh.
I think.
Yeah, you had page 15. You're in the detail. That's fine.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
That might explain it more.
So largely this is under line 5112, administrative assistant to select board. This is now a part-time 19.5-hour position, increased to account for hourly rate of the part-time staff. So is that another minimum wage increase?
No.
Okay.
So when, do you want?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
You're good.
When we developed the FY20 budget, we used 21,000 as a placeholder. We hadn't yet hired on the part-time admin assistant. We brought on Joanne Duncan, has a lot of background, municipal background in general, has worked for CPC for a long time. We brought her on at an hourly rate that was a little bit higher than what we were carrying in FY20. So she's not actually gonna see a rate change in FY21, but the adjustment is to account for the rate that we hired her at. Just a note, this cost is offset by CPC when she does CPC work on town time. Though she tracks those hours and CPC makes an adjustment. So the 21 and 25, we haven't had her yet for a whole year. We don't really know how many CPC hours she puts in. My guess is that that full 25 is not going to be expended because it's going to be offset by CPC dollars. But we don't really have any history to gauge what that offset's going to be yet.
Then the assessors department, we're looking at what looks to me by about a 6.6% department head increase in salary
Same
there.
page?
72.
Yes, with regards to the salary increase, we have a union contract. There's two people in the bargaining unit that work in that department. We have yet to settle the contract that'll expire in July, June 30. Mary has been with us 3 cycles, really, setting tax rates. In terms of proving her value to us, we got her very inexpensively, so we wanted to, compensate her appropriately to the market, and also recognize the new growth, especially in commercial, industrial property and personal property, as a result of her work ethic, professionalism, all that stuff. So to retain and to keep her here, I think it's critical that we fund it at that level.
All right, and then you've got, I'm sorry.
Mr. Prisby, apology, I just want to ask a question. Do we have a comprehensive report or a study on all positions within the municipal center with respect to where they're currently being compensated at today that you could perhaps provide to the board? So when we see these types of rationales to the budget, we might have something that we ourselves, personally for me, I can point back to and be like, okay, yeah, that was identified umpteen years ago, to your point, and we're trying to rectify that. We
The
used to have
last
a personnel advisory
comprehensive
committee.
comp and class plan we did was in 2012, so it is a little dated, it's 8 years old. But we, and I've done this with department heads, I'm like, where are you relative to your peers, much like you do with the town administrator in your case? And that's still below the average, but we haven't done one because it costs money or it takes someone's time to do it. So I put the onus back on the department heads, and then we double check to look at people's budgets online for those other communities for comparables, but we don't have a hard document.
Yeah, so the data is compiled by the Massachusetts Municipal Human Resources Association. They do a benchmark survey every year that you can access online if you have, if you can get access, which we can. And you can look up what, your position makes, you can compare based on geography, you can compare based on population, you can compare based on budget size. It is self-reported, so you can only get what people provide. But that's sort of what we use internally when the department heads come to us and they say, look, I gathered all this data and I'm still, in the bottom third or at the bottom. We go to that benchmark and just verify that, they are in the bottom or in the bottom third or wherever. So, if you wanted to see that data, I could certainly pull it.
Well, I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do, it shows that the town is looking to, make right on certain items in the budget. And I think when they see these increases, I think it just adds to the narrative as to there is justification to that. So I think that would be,
Yeah, I mean, you're right, I think you're right, it adds credibility and we're trying to provide equity.
sorry, I didn't mean to derail your questions.
No, that's,
We can do that.
that's a great point. I guess the next question I had was about the human resources, page 82. I understand what the need is for all of these, but in particular, I get what we're trying to do with human resources, but there's a 55.7% FY20 versus FY21 increase, if you could just explain for the benefit of the public what the rationale is on that one.
You have to kind of go back to treasurer collector for the number of people they had in there versus what they have now. But Becky, you got a better handle on the day-to-day tasks and also supporting the payables piece for the back office of the school department that runs through Joan's office in HR as well. So can you? go
Yeah,
into that in more
sure.
detail?
So right now, our HR staff is part-time. She works 25 hours a week. Her main responsibility, the thing that takes up the majority of her time, is that she does the bi-weekly payroll for the town side, and she does the payables for both the town and the school. That takes up, I would say, 90% of her time right now. The other 10%, she helps with onboarding employees, getting them set up for physicals, walking them through the welcome packet, explaining to them benefits, things like that. There is a whole host of other things that we could be doing, should be doing, but simply don't have the manpower to do. So that's where we're proposing that this person go full-time. There's a lot of stuff on the workers' compensation end that we need to be doing in terms of training, that we just don't have time to schedule, set up. We would love to schedule trainings here, have people come here. We get additional credits off of our insurance if we provide those trainings here and have people from other towns come attend them. So we'll look to do that. There's a lot of records and archiving compliance review that simply has been sitting on a desk in a human resources office for 10, 15 years. Someone needs to go through that, determine what can be shredded after requesting, what is the department?
Keeper of records.
Yeah, the state, you have to make a request to shred it and then have it shredded. That needs to get done. And then the stuff that we need to keep, we need to get filed and stored somewhere. She'll continue to do payroll. She'll continue to do payables. She'll continue to help train school staff when they bring on new people. She's pretty much the go-to when it comes to training for payroll. And I know she's offered a lot of support to Kristen Gasper and Dan Gale and their department while they've been bringing new people on to do payroll for them. So it is very necessary to bring her to full-time. There's just a lot of stuff that we're not doing now that we have to start doing for compliance reasons. So that's.
And there's a big equity issue there in terms of comparing the work, the amount of work and responsibility as it compares to counterparts even within the organization. So I mean, it's it's a hard conversation to have, but, you know, there's an inequity there in terms of her workload and the compensation she gets. And we're trying to adjust.
Sure. I guess my next question, page 90, town clerk, tab 161.
Yeah, this is a contentious matter for us. We've had a number of department heads. Beth was one of the best examples, I think, in terms of not being compensated to the market, if you will. Candy certainly was not even close to where the market was in terms of a town clerk and its responsibility. So we took a 3-year approach with some staff. We were lucky enough with Beth that the trustees kicked in a portion of the pay to get her to be competitive. And we just, you know, look at the town clerk and the value of elections and the matter that they, you know, from dog licenses to running an election, there's a huge gamut between those two things. And we just wanted to make it right in one fell swoop, as opposed to a 3-year plan. And Candy has asked me on a number of occasions to make adjustments, and rightly so. And there's never a good time.
Okay.
There's never a good time, so we just said we should do it. We have to do it, so we put it in as a request.
Is that the FY20 budgeted salary of 59,303? Is that in line with what historically had been over the past decade or so?
It's lower.
Yeah,
And Donna.
Donna was higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because she was in the bargaining unit, so she had a lot of years, so I think I think it was less money than Maureen, and Candy was less money than Donna.
Okay. And then, jumping all the way to,
You did tap those.
well, I won't even tell you, I'm not very organized this week. This is one copy I left at home, and then I had to do something else at work, and I left that at work. It's just a disaster. There is, on page 244, there was a chart for new growth.
Just see why she swipes up, I don't want to make people busy.
I know.
Why I should just do it on that thing.
I'm saying the opposite. I'm envious of your
I
copy.
can you tab on
The
those?
244?
Like, can you?
Yeah, I think so, but I can't figure
It's a
it out.
long budget.
Yeah, on the bottom,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you touch on the bottom.
Oh, well,
There you go.
learn something new every day.
To what? To,
44.
thanks.
You can
Appendix E, glossary of
You,
terms.
if you open it in
Yeah.
iBooks.
I got it. I have
Yeah.
it in iBooks, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
E, A, B, C, D, E, it's right there.
244, you said, yeah?
Made it.
Yep.
I'm getting there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Who's best?
Okay. The Twin Towers of growth there, for 2022. Are those the growth numbers that we were assuming for UPS?
The UPS number.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to keep that in at this point.
Yeah, it's not in the, if you go to the
Right, I
projection
recognize that,
page, it's
right.
not in that. It's just, to give people an idea of, I guess, like, the best case scenario is
Right.
they call us up and say, hey, we're coming, you know?
I thought for the sake of being consistent throughout the book, and
Yeah,
to the extent
sure.
that people are reading this, I didn't want them to be confused that that's what that was. I think that is all the questions that I have.
So can we add a sentence there, or do we just want to knock that?
I think I'll probably
All right.
to reflect what the projection shows.
Any other questions? Does anybody in the audience have any questions they'd like to ask? Or any department heads that would like to give a little statement? Tell a story? No?
Oh, I did have one more question. I
Okay.
think that I had emailed this question. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at it, but if we, given where we are in the budget, and
did,
the
yep.
budget uncertainty, if we capped non-union salary increases at 2 or 3%, where would we be?
from where we are now, if we gave everyone 2% and didn't, I think we have 16 people, you gave some examples of the changes, $32,000 difference from 2% versus what we're
Save
carrying.
$32,000.
Okay. And the reason I asked that question, this is the comment phase of this part, it's not because I don't recognize the value of what everybody in this room does. You know, for instance, Mary, it would be penny wise and pound foolish to not give Mary what she's owed. She does a fantastic job, and she is more than earning her own salary. But at the same time, one of the complicating factors of where we are, and this will, I think, bleed into the override discussion that we have next, is that it makes it difficult to go back to taxpayers and tell them that the situation is dire, but that still we're competing with other communities, and we're going to give out raises that people in the private sector themselves don't see. And I know that's unfair. I mean, it's terribly unfair. There's a difference between the public sector and the private sector. But my concern is we would be sending the wrong message, and we don't talk enough about message in this room. It's a real thing to be able to say to the community, this is where we're going. And you not only pay taxes and expend that, but on the flip side, you get a service. And there are people in this building that we have hired and we retain and we want to keep retaining because they do a good job, and they need to be compensated or else they're going to go elsewhere. When we say to people that, I think sometimes we make the mistake of saying to them, you can have something for nothing. That leads people to believe that we can keep paying less and less in tax, well, not less and less in taxes, but smaller and smaller tax rate increases, but still get the same service. And it's just not true. And it actually perversely leads good people away from wanting to be employed in local government. As you know, when you let someone walk out the door, it's really hard to find their replacement. And one of the reasons that it's hard to find their replacement is because it's hard for them to make the case for salary increases. I want everybody to be on the same page and know that, if we don't increase our revenue for next year, we could potentially lose people. And part of the way you do that is say, okay, well, taxpayers, here's what it is. We're capping at 2% across the board. We're only saving a pittance, but you're still going to pay more next year, and you're going to get less in services. I think that's reality.
Are you making a motion to cap the increases to 2%?
No. I want to see. I don't know. What do you guys think? That thought hadn't occurred to me.
Does anybody else want to go first? Or?
No, you can go
Oh,
first.
okay. I guess the bigger question for me, it's big picture, to what end?
Right.
Okay, so if we save $32,000 by capping increases at 2%, where does that money go? Does it go to the school department for them to do increases in their salaries and programming and all of that sort of thing? So to me, it's kind of, all of our employees are valued. There's all of our employees bring value, whether they're driving a truck or an administrative assistant or running the rec department or running the senior center. So I understand the messaging of a blanket statement. We are not going to rate, nobody's getting over 2%. But I think overall, it's not great for morale because people work really hard. And when you take away that, that reward for doing your job really well, you don't, the motivation goes down in terms of people working really hard. And we have great staff. And so I would not be in favor of capping it. I understand what you're saying in terms of messaging, but I think in practicality, we have good people, and yeah, it's, I understand we are trying to figure out what the next steps are, but I'm not there. Anybody else have anything?
Just an equity issue, or again, we're having this discussion kind of in a vacuum, right? Because there's a $30 million budget inside this budget that's for the school department. They have wage increases, they have teachers, they have other administrative support staff that are getting increases, whatever they may be. There's certainly pay increases that are deserved across the board. But, you know, if we were gonna do something that capped, we gotta think about it in totality, so we don't alienate people in the very same building in which they work with others. So I think it's a fine discussion, and if that's where we go, it just has to be more of a global than just 32,000 here. It has to be overall.
I think at one point since 2014, and I can't remember what year it was, it might have been in the budget that was done. What was it? There were two budgets done for before
15,
the override in
yep.
15.
Yep.
Was it in 15 that both the non-union personnel for the schools and the non-union personnel for in the town agreed to cap at 2%? I thought that happened at one point.
On top of my head, I don't know. It could have, I just don't,
Okay.
I don't recall it. I know there was a zero in there someplace. There were 2 zeros in there for the town administrator, just to kind of be a symbol. But that's all I can recall at this point.
I mean, for me, ideally, what we would do is say to town members, you can bandage this and not be equitable to the town employees, and we'll reduce hours and save that $500,000 and limp along to the next year. Or you can complete the vision that we have for this community. You can retain these good people. You can have the services that you have come to enjoy, but we are going to present to you a responsible override proposal. That would be my preference.
Just like you did in 15?
Right.
You did it, you were successful.
Right.
You stayed to the letter of it with one bump for a blip for health insurance. And without catastrophic impact, which is great.
I have a question. Ed, the statement that you made with regards to setting a message and capping increases at 2%, is that also apply to people who are not in line with their peers in surrounding communities that you're trying to increase?
Yeah. Yep.
See, that's, and I know what you're saying about to the public. I guess my point is, if staff are alignment, like with their peers in similar communities with similar roles and responsibilities, I think that's another big piece of this too that we need to get back to is, are the roles and responsibilities, apples to apples, right? And if that's the case, then I can potentially see where sending a message to the community is, to your point, makes a kind of responsible growth in those line items. But when you put that out there and you're trying to create pay equity amongst staff members, both men and women in our organization, I think that puts them in a very awkward position. And I think that has regressive, it's a regressive tactic, because then those people end up leaving,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
I mean, I just think there's a cold hard reality here, which is we have X amount of dollars, and we're going to be, at the end of the day, we're going to be unfair to somebody, and very many somebodies. We're going to be unfair to our employees. We're going to be unfair to our students. We're going to be unfair to our taxpayers. The only fairness that will come out of what I'm suggesting is that you could limp along for another year, and that we won't go back to taxpayers and ask them for more than they're already obligated to pay. That's the only fairness that will come out of this. So I totally agree with you. It's not equitable. It's not fair. But there's a certain financial reality here. And just one more thing, just again, so the general public knows, it's really difficult to benchmark for people in the public sector. Because when we say, for instance, Millbury pays their rec coordinator this, or Shrewsbury pays their police chief that, we are assuming that what these other communities do is they're operating rationally, right? They're within their budget and they're paying their people what their people are market rate. That might not be true. Those budgets might be completely out of whack, and they might be having the same conversation that we're having, going, oh my God, what are we going to do next year? So we have to, when you benchmark, you always have to take it with a grain of salt, like, okay, what are the roles and responsibilities of that person with a similar title, and what is going on in their community, and do we want to be in that same place? That's my only word of caution on benchmarking.
The other thing I'd like to say in this discussion is I think we have to be aware of our lowest paid employees and their ability to pay an override. So if we're not willing to increase salary, but then we go to increase their tax bill for our town employees that live in town, we just have to be cognizant, like the paraprofessionals that work in the school department, some admins, some truck drivers, people that may, our lowest our lowest paid employees that work in town. We gotta be careful that we don't make it impossible for them to stay and live in the community in which they work. I mean, this is just all stuff to balance, right? It's all a balancing act, but, it's not just the most vulnerable citizens when we talk about an override. Because there are, you know, Mary works really hard with exemptions and abatements, and Barbara, they work to get those most vulnerable people covered, but there's a gap there. There's people that do make money, but they don't quite make enough to offset the increase in their taxes. So, again, it's just something that we all have to be aware of.
And again, you know, to counter my own point, you shouldn't have to take a vow of poverty if you want to go into public life. You should be able to go to work, afford to live here, afford to raise your
Right.
children here, and enjoy your existence on this planet for however long it is. But again, you know, there is a cold hard reality, which is we have $68 million, and we got to figure out how to spend it, and we can't go over that. So that's it.
And I just want to do a global point. I mean, Town of Shrewsbury, great town manager. You know, they have $3 million of new money to spend. It's a large community, but they have $900,000 more than we do. They're having the same discussion, so I don't want anybody to feel that you're alone.
Right.
And I don't want the community at large to feel like, you know, we're the only ones that, you know, oh, we only have $2.1 million to spend next year. What are we going to do? That's a good number. We've worked hard to get that number. It's just not enough to meet every request. So now the next step is, what do you do about that? Which you guys are doing, but I just want you to know, you're not alone. There's other communities that are in the same and or worse shape in terms of making considerations for how to balance a $68 million budget.
Any other questions or comments? No? Oh, come on up. I thought maybe we answered your question, but we didn't.
Sitaraman Ganesan, 28 Seaver Farm. We are so lucky. Actually, 208 kids go to private schools from this town. So the school, they are not accounting that 208 kids. If they account, then we should, our revenue should be somewhere like $68.2 million plus 2.6 million. The 2.6 million that I came up with is like, if you multiply 208 times the per pupil amount, that is like 12,760. That comes to somewhere around like 2.6 million. So my question is like, you know, are we not saving? I mean, forget about the state funding, the local government. I mean, we pay the school too, right? I mean, so we should be saving per year. We should be saving somewhat like $1.4 million. I mean, think that, you know, the 208 kids attend Grafton public schools.
We avoid that cost because they're not here, and it's not a direct
Right, I know.
correlation between the per pupil expenditure and the number of kids, because they could be
You're
in any
lucky.
class. There might not be an added teacher, but to say we're saving is just it's not an accurate statement. We're just avoiding cost.
And don't we have to bus them if they want to go to a different school too?
A private school would be different. There would be a charter
Yeah.
reimbursement on the cherry sheet that would be taken off the top of our revenue.
But remember, we had to start busing to Touchstone, which has
Right.
added 60 grand to the school transportation budget a couple of years ago.
Right.
Where we hadn't, was it last
It's
year?
just like the insurance that we talked in the last meeting. The school staff, I don't know that I'm saying this right, but you know, if they all apply for insurance, then you know.
That's another one.
That's right.
So I mean, actually, we are lucky. I mean, if the kids come here, then you know, the school may ask for more funding.
Yep.
Peter, did you have?
No,
I saw-
no,
okay.
no.
Thank you.
Tim answered the question.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, we will, we have select board TA reports, but we don't really have anything this meeting, right? this is
I got 5 or 6 things.
Oh,
but
sure,
I can
go.
put in an email
You
to
have
you.
a
It's fine.
report?
Well, I do, but I think we're past the budget, and I know there's a lot of staff here who probably wants to go home. I don't know if we want to dismiss them, Tim, or if you want them to stick around for the rest of our meeting.
It's only 8:30. What else are they gonna do?
I'll answer that for you if you'd like, but I
It's
just
the
wanted,
Bachelor on?
I just wanted to say
Yes.
thank you to all of you for coming out tonight, and for the few of you that had to answer our questions. I think I speak on behalf of the entire board.
Yes.
Thank you for coming out tonight. I know it's a last minute Tuesday thing. I really appreciate you know how important this is to all of us and to this community. It clearly shows your dedication to this town, and I couldn't be more gracious for you for coming out tonight. Thank you.
I want to second what Peter said. I mean, there's a certain irony to the conversation that we just had, and you're all sitting here. You know, it's 8:30 at night, and don't think it goes unnoticed.
Right.
So I'm sorry we even have to have this conversation. I really am.
It's up to you.
Then, guys,
Oh, always the
If you
leader.
could
What
be
a great
quiet
leader,
in
Paul.
orderly fashion, please.
Good night.
Oh, you're more than
Thank
welcome
you.
to stay for the whole meeting.
Good night.
You should have led with that.
Oh, Anita was hiding in the back. I
She
didn't even
doesn't feel
see
well.
her.
Leave her be.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh. All right, so let's start with, select board reports. Does any member of the board have a report?
We're cruising along on the GSC. I'm just about done with my my benchmarking draft. Speaking of benchmarking, I'm going to run it by the team on Thursday. That's where we're at.
Okay, do you have that's your next meeting Thursday?
Thursday. Yep. 7 p.m. Not sure where the room is, but someone
Okay.
knows.
They're all being recorded, right? 'Cause it's
No,
important
some of them aren't, because I think we were up in, what's that little tiny room upstairs, H or G or something like that? That was a,
stuff. If,
Yeah, the
if-
new room G doesn't have any equipment just yet, but we're trying.
I know, but, it's important, so if, depending on who is in the other rooms, like if it's somebody that can be,
Yeah, our goal, the goal is to get everybody on TV, but,
Right, right.
but if they booked and they have something, it's
Yeah,
just a
I know, but-
competitive day-to-day
all right,
game time decision.
yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
one other thing. So we're planning on meeting next week. We have a meeting next week.
Yes.
You will not be here,
correct.
right? So, if there's sustainability commission, like benchmarking that you want to put on the agenda.
Sure.
Just let me know, or
Yeah.
Tim know. Okay.
Sure, will do.
Great.
Madam Chair, not a select board member report, but I wanted to ask the board, in light of last week's update with the library building committee, I didn't know how the board would feel about having one of our board members appointed to that building committee. I think in light of everything that's kind of gone on up there, the sensitivity to the site, I wonder if it warrants an elected board member from the select board to be on there, just to give us on regular updates on the status and the progress of that project.
Isn't
You
Brooke
think-
filling that role?
Yeah, Brooke
Yeah.
is our appointment, but did you not think that, Andy gave a good update?
Andy's the OPM, he's not a select board member. I'm talking about a select board member, someone who can be at these meetings and provide, like I do with the DPW, like when there's major developments, or there's major developments with disability, or with the Sustainability Commission or Fire Study Committee. Just ask the board how it felt. I think I spoke to one of you months ago about this and kind of let it slide, and my fault for not bringing it up earlier, but I just feel that what's going on up there, I just feel, I don't know, I think I'd rather have one of us five that's appointed. I'm not saying kick someone off, but just saying one of us appointed to that building committee.
I think if if you would like updates, we just have to ask him and he'll come in and give an update.
I'd be happy to serve. I mean, I have an interest in helping on some other things that the library's trying to do with the trustees and friends, et cetera. So, if, I've had experience on building committees as well, so.
You've done one or two, haven't you?
Yes. So, I mean, just to give us an update, an inside update. I don't know what the charter is or whether or not we can appoint somebody, but I can attend.
Yeah, if you don't mind attending, that'd be great. Then we don't have to, Brooke can still serve and Donna can attend, and it's almost over.
I'm
It's
not saying Brooke doesn't not serve. I'm just saying, Brooke's not on the board anymore. I know he was former select board member who was on there from the inception. No, his input to that board is invaluable. He's been part of that project from its inception. So I just feel that with the change orders coming in and just the sensitivity of the site and just having someone from the board here that can give us those updates on a regular Tuesday without having to bring other members of the community unless it's imperative, I just thought might be an added benefit for the board. But if no one feels that way, that's fine. I just wanted to bring it up.
I'm happy to tell.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
perfect.
Need to know when. That's the only thing. I
Yeah,
need to
and if you can't make it, I'd be happy to go too. But I don't know how many are already appointed. I don't know if there's any openings either. I think that's what,
It's our committee.
yeah, that's true.
We can appoint anyone we
Very
want
good
to.
Well, no, it's your appointment to the committee, but
Yeah.
the committee itself is a town meeting committee.
No, it's not.
The planning building committee for
We
the
never
library?
voted to form a building committee.
All right.
If you can find the article, which, if you can find it and tell me that, that's fine, I get that, but then we go to Ray, but other than that,
Well, you would still make the appointment from your board.
Yeah.
For the structure of that committee. It's organized by town meeting. At least that's how every other one was done, so I'm confused. I'll look into it. I thought there was one that was established by town meeting. Because they came back and gave reports every time it failed. And I don't think we updated the fact, because you had 3 votes, 2 failures and the last one passed. So I don't know. I mean, we'll look into it either way.
sure,
I
no,
just,
that'd be great, thank you.
Any other select board reports? Mine was only gonna be a reminder that I'm away on school break next week. Doreen is going to run the meeting, so if there are any agenda additions, make sure to get them to her probably as soon as possible because they'll be putting together the agenda in the packet this week. So, yeah.
Disabilities Commission is having a workshop tomorrow night, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just
I
trying to
have-
organize and figure out what we need to do to prioritize all of the things that are coming into us and figure out what to tackle first.
Affordable Housing Trust is also meeting tomorrow night. Anybody has an
and
interest in?
FinCom, we're going to Finance Committee.
Oh, yeah, FinCom's
I was at the budget. Finance Committee meeting tonight too. I didn't see their agenda, so I don't know what's on there.
So, TA report, if the select board's done.
Yeah.
TA report.
Yeah, just quickly, I just have a couple quick things. We are having ongoing discussions with development for Wyman Gordon, the mass development site on Route 30, Pine Street. With Pine Street, we had a pre-bidders conference here with Mass Historic because there are Mass Historic credits available for restoration of the buildings that are on site at 8 Pine. We do have a meeting, a second walkthrough with potential bidders for 8 Pine on Thursday. So we look forward to that. We've had coordinating meetings with Affordable Housing Trust and Jean Burnett, the south side of the Fisherville Mill site, the 60 units that has been carved off and being able to be developed. There's 2 developers that are interested. I know I reported on that, but we're still working on coordinating the effort to make sure things like infrastructure cost is, for the water district in South Grafton, the hookup fee for water per unit is $5,000. So it's cost prohibitive for most contractors to be able to do 60 units at $5,000. So we need to have some discussions with the water district in terms of supported programs or not true local initiative programs for affordability, but something that's supported by the board, and obviously the 40R district was supported by the community. We're gonna have a discussion at some point with the South Grafton Water District relative to those fees in some way, because it is cost prohibitive. So that's one thing that we're working on as we go forward.
Tim, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just on that point, how many units would we be looking at for affordability?
They would all be rental, so it'd be 60 units. They
60
would all
units.
count, I don't know how many would be I think it's 25%, but they
Okay.
all count towards the SHI.
Okay. And I assume Burnett has reached out to the Affordable Housing Trust?
Yes, yeah, we facilitated a meeting with,
Good. I think this has been going on for a decade, but.
yes. And I will tell you that, if Pine Street, Fisherville, and Route 30, which is the Afonso piece, which they were in front of planning last night, they're doing a mixed use on the front of Route 30. We would exceed the goal of 10% and be at 12.10% for affordable. As of October, we had 5.25% affordable in Grafton. So
Good.
those 3 developments, if they were to happen, would certainly push us way beyond that mark.
Perfect.
We continue to work with the TIP project on Main Street. That appraisal process is moving forward. Coordinating DPW reuse, the Super Park survey kickoff and the visioning and the layout of the park, that's kicked off and underway, and there's 2 meetings, which you might have announced before I got in the room tonight. So those are out and about and being publicized. They are at upstairs in One Grafton Common and Apple Tree Arts.
March 4th,
There's 2, right? March 4th and April 4th? Or April 9th?
April 9th.
All right.
Yep.
And they start at 7, but we'll be open at 6:30.
Yeah.
So we'll get more out on that to the community and to the board. The new planner, Chris was sitting here in the front row, very happy to see that. So we do have a meet and greet planned for him on Friday at 9:30, so if you can come by and introduce yourself and say hi. We're inviting a lot of folks, a lot of different committees to come in and meet Chris. We did meet with Permit View today. They're the software provider. We reset our goal of launching the permitting software that we've been trying to get off the ground since 2017. I'm embarrassed to say it's been that long, but there's been a lot of nuance with historic records and bringing them over. So we had the CEO of Viewpoint in today, and got a personal cell phone, which was nice, and they are moving us along at lightning speed to get us to launch this across all departments. But first priority is building relative to historic records and the planning department. And we can do all others. We have all the forms that need to be digitized and electronic, so those fields will autofill for whoever's making application. Our renewals for liquor licenses and permits for common vic or Board of Health, septic, whatever, that'll all be in there and all be done online. So the paper, where our goal right now is a June 30 rollover, if you will, where July 1 we'll have all of those departments taking electronic information versus paper. So, and there's a pay feature as well. So that's been the goal. Nothing's changed in 17 except getting it off the ground. So that is, I was with Joe for a long time and now obviously with Chris, but I am rolling up my sleeves on that particular matter. We're coordinating with National Grid on the paving of Route 30. The road is horrible. I'll apologize in advance. We will not pave that entire road until June when school is out because we will have to close the road to do both sides. But we're coordinating that effort between Alfonso, National Grid, the railroad, because they dug up some portion of that road, and the town for the sewer project. So all of those things, we had to combine all the dollars and get one contractor to do the whole paving. And we also have to coordinate with Tufts because they dug up their crosswalks all the way up to Willard. So it's been a huge effort to get that squared away and funded with other people's money. Ongoing contract negotiations with GMEA, we covered that. And then we're starting the search for the fire chief, as we kind of covered. Public safety consultants who used to be in the, Wayne Sampson used to be in the building down here in the police station with the Police Chiefs Association. He now has a public safety consultant group in Massachusetts that will provide the assessment center for hiring of the full-time chief. We had 2 proposals. They were the cheapest out of the 2 to run that assessment center. So I'm going to develop the ad and do the position profile. We'll get it advertised. We'll get applications in. We'll make the initial assessment, but then they'll go through an assessment center where they'll be, quizzed, if you will, on fire safety protocol, management, budgeting, personnel, negotiations, state regulations as it relates to 104 inspections and so forth. So we'll put them through a gauntlet of exercises to prove their weight, if you will. And that concludes my report.
I'm sorry, I have one more thing to add. I did, for the the next TRICOM meeting, we have it tentatively March 5th. I wanted to double check with you guys, but Laura and Matt both were okay with that date. It is a Thursday because we're having trouble with the Tuesdays between our regular meetings, having a chunk enough, having time enough to have a discussion, instead of trying to squeeze it into an hour. So,
Calendar now.
Me too.
all right. Which brings us, no correspondence, correct, Peter?
No.
Okay, discussion. So, Ed asked for this to be on the agenda, which, it goes right into, so I don't know if you wanted to start or.
Yeah, so I think just hopping right back into where we left off with the budget discussion, I think that was a kind of a neat segue. We got to a point where everybody agrees that the people in this building provide value. I think that going down that list of cost increases and compensation increases, you can justify each and every one of them. They're good people, they're hardworking people, you want to keep them. But at the same time, we've got a budget problem. Even were we to piece it together this year, given some of the recommendations that Tim and Becca put up there, those recommendations have obvious drawbacks. Some of those drawbacks include pushing out capital maintenance to later years, which, as we know, having gone through the 90s and 2000s, that's what happened to us. Our forebears and our predecessors all pushed off certain capital maintenance, and then we ended up having to build new buildings all at once. That's just more costly in the long run. So you get to a point where you're like, well, is it worth it? And what would we even be doing were we to duct tape something together with these various solutions and rely on marijuana money that we're not sure about and rely on safer grants that we're not sure about for an employee that we're about to interview or to go out to try and retain? Or do we kind of push forward with an idea of where we might want to be on an override? And I understand that since we had our last presentation about a month ago, that the health insurance number came in lower than expected. That, I think, might be an opportunity here to revisit the override and make some more hopeful projections about what might happen in the future. And by that, I mean, health insurance has been a cost driver for us really over the past decade, and it started spiking in 2002, around about the same time state aid started declining and dropped off the cliff in 2008. If healthcare is to level off expense-wise and we were to pass an override, the next override might last much longer than this one ever did. And there's maybe reason to believe that that is the case, and it's just speculation on my part, but talking to people in healthcare, one of the things they're saying is, well, the premiums aren't going up as fast is because healthcare plans aren't covering anything anymore, which isn't a good thing for consumers, but if it means that healthcare might not be as much of a cost driver going forward, then that would definitely be beneficial for the town. So I was wondering, given the healthcare number, where we think we're going to be in terms of an override. I mean, has there still been discussion? Has the school committee reached out? Has anybody talked to Jay about where we're going to be?
No, I think they canceled their hearing tonight. They're meeting to talk about what that impact is for the 230, and if that avoids what we think might be necessary or it doesn't. And I think I'm waiting for them to tell us that's what is the status.
Okay. I talked to Jay this week, and if we were to fund them at 4.13%, the cuts to the program wouldn't be obviously as drastic as if we increased them to only 3.5%. But there would still be cuts. And his representation to me is, he would try to make it as painless for the students as possible this year. Once you get into next year, a year from now, and you're talking about the FY22 budget, there would be cuts that would directly impact students, and parents would start to know the difference. So what we're talking about here are cuts that the staff and the teachers would notice and would make their lives difficult. So it's not to say that students' lives wouldn't be made difficult, it would just be indirect, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of having resources for teachers to go to and staff to help service them, teachers would be more frustrated over the course of the next year. And then by the time we come back next year for an override, you're talking about a pot of money that again is going to be large. We would just be forestalling this for a year. And it would be to maintain a program that already has made cuts over the course of the past 6 years. So what I think I want us to remember when we talk about should we do this or should we not do this, and what are we trying to preserve and maintain, we did make a contribution to this contribution to schools. The school budget grew at about 4.1%, 4.13% back in 2017, and then there was a year also, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, where it grew at 4.5%. And each of those years, there were cuts made there as well. For instance, Millbury Street Elementary School lost a vice principal who was very well liked in all respects, and he was somebody that the kids really liked. And were we to go for an override this year, I don't really have any expectation that those positions we lost over the course of the past 5 years would be brought back. I think it would be just to maintain what we have right now. And if we lose positions again this year, when we go for an override next year, those positions are gone forever. So instead of say, if Jay comes and says, well, I know I said that I would lose 10 people this year at 3.5, but I'll only lose 6 or 7 next year at 4.13. You have to remember that we've already lost maybe 6 or so, somewhere between 6 and 10 over the course of the past 5 years. So really, that's 16 positions over the course of the past 5 years. So you're starting to get to a place where, yeah, you have to ask yourself, well, what are we doing? I mean, if we know we're going to need this anyway, and there is a program that we said we valued and we wanted to maintain 4 years or 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, 5 years ago, you know, are we willing to see that dismantled, death by 1,000 cuts? Or are we going to say right now, look, this is a problem that's not going away. This isn't a 1 year thing. This is something that we're going to need to solve over the course of the next decade. My recommendation would be, you know, regardless of where he comes back, that's a path that we follow, and then we work with them to figure out what the number is that everybody's comfortable with. I think the reaction to $6.5 million last month was, I think people got sticker shock about that. I also understand, I understand every penny of it. And in particular, Tim, I thought the capital, what you wanted to do with capital for $1 million for capital was really smart. And I'm wondering if, you know, the smart thing to do with this cannabis money, rather than rely on that for operations, if that's something we should be directing towards capital every year to go into that capital stabilization account. You know, that way we're starting to chip away at capital at a much faster clip than we are now. And again, that saves the public money in the long run, rather than deferring capital expense. Because I just don't see any value to kicking more capital down the road, having it be more expensive in 2025, and then to look back at taxpayers and say, yeah, but we saved you an override for that 1 year. Remember? They won't remember. All they're going to remember is that the roads were terrible, you know, and there were no lines on them. You know, that's where it's going to be. And I always tell them, your taxes are still going to go up, and you're just going to get less. So.
I just have a couple of things with that. I mean, certainly
You have the school budget there? Is that right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, just overall, I don't want to have a school budget conversation without the school committee, but just, you know, looking at their budget, since fiscal year 15, they've added 57 employees, 36 are paraprofessionals, 21 are teachers, 1.7 admin. So you're saying that they have lost some positions, but they've also added some positions. So overall, they have added positions since fiscal year 15. And the other thing that we haven't really talked about, again, and we'll talk about it in school committee, is they are negotiating a contract. And that will have a humongous impact on their operation,
Yep.
their operating budget,
Yep.
because they have so many employees.
Yep.
So what is in the budget now is what they are currently at.
Right.
But their contract is expiring. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's a big deal. I mean, that can drastically alter how much.
That's a real moving target, and it's
Yeah.
one of the messages that I tried to drill home 3 years ago now, was that, you know, we're no longer, this isn't 1995 anymore, it's not even 2005 anymore. The era where we could ignore capital expenses, shift some more money to operating expenses and try and compete with towns like Westboro and Shrewsbury, that's gone. That's gone. There lies the path of never-ending repetitive overrides. And, you know, I said it before, I'll say it again, I worry that eventually people are going to get sick of that and reflexively say, well, because you're passing an override, you've done something wrong. And I hear it all the time, but people don't come to these meetings, they don't delve into the minutia of what we're talking about. Some of those positions, Jen, as you point out, yeah, they were added, but they were added as a result of mandates that the school comply with certain state laws about education. And we don't get penny for penny back with circuit breaker money. We get 75 cents on the dollar at best. I was reading the other day that a state senator who I like passed a bill requiring that students be educated in economic basics, financial basics. That's a wonderful idea. Give us some money for it, all right? And so we keep having to foot the bill for these initiatives that are fantastic, but at the same time, our income is being artificially restricted to 2.5% plus new growth. So a lot of what the school committee has gone through, the school system has gone through over the past 5 years is, all right, yes, we want to add programming, and yes, we want to give talented students a real opportunity to compete with students from other communities, which, by the way, we absolutely should, but we can't because we're still doing the basics on, things like special education or complying with other state requirements. And really, over the course of the past 5 years, the school system's been able to tread water at best, and they've had to cut people that they provided real value. For instance, that assistant principal, he's the resources that teachers go to when they have issues within the system. He's the resources that students go to when they have issues within the system. That person's not there anymore, and so the whole system, the whole school has to adjust to that new reality. And as time goes on and you keep losing people like that, in the same way we were talking about losing people in the municipal center, services suffer. So how much more do we want to lose before we say, you know what, yes, ladies and gentlemen of the public, we want to be responsible stewards with your money. But at the same time, we have a vision of what the town should be and could be, and here's what that vision is, and here's what we need to do to responsibly implement that. And that, frankly, was what I was trying to drive home to the teachers union 3 years ago. And I said, look, we would love to pay everybody top dollar, but we can't. We want to keep the program in place. And, everybody has to sacrifice a little bit. The teachers, the admin, and taxpayers in order to get to a place where nobody's exactly really happy with it, but we can live with it and produce something that we're proud of. And I think without taking that next step and going to the public with this is what we need, we're selling ourselves short.
Anybody else want to have anything to say?
So I think we've established with the projections and what the town's ability to raise and appropriate, obviously, we see not only this year, but the subsequent years after that, and seeing where the state has addressed Chapter 70 funding, only, 23 or 24 school communities are seeing more than 80% of the money.
Right.
And Grafton's not one of them. So out of 322 school districts, that was the statistic that was given at one of the DESI meetings. So given that, I think Grafton, needs to ask itself, right? I think this board identifies and acknowledges the situation that not only we are financially, and this is to no fault of anybody's. It's just this is the circumstance in which we're in, and we owe it to ourselves. I mean, we see a problem that we need to somehow kind of fix over the next 5, 7, maybe 10 years. To your point, and do we solve it? Do we try to put something in place to lessen the burden, or do we? I hate to say this, but do we always try to, at the last minute, try to figure it out? But then next year, do we have to end up taking away whatever temporary gains we were able to make because we just can't make ends meet? Personally, I'd rather ask the community what it wants to do. I really do. I really am at the point where debating this any further is really just kind of, kicking the can down the road, or delaying a year is kicking the can down the road. We all see it. We see the problem. It's right in front of us. We owe it to the community to say, what do you want to do about it?
Here's what they cut.
Madam,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
good chance.
I was done, by the way.
Thanks. Obviously, we've got a lot of information that we've had to digest. We've had a lot of inputs. We've had a lot of numbers thrown at us. We still are missing a key number, which is the school committee and how they're going to react to the money that you've been able to find for them. My concern is timing. It looks like now the school committee's not going to have that discussion until next week. We don't meet again until the March 4th to perhaps talk about this. TRICOM is when did you suggest?
March
March
4th.
3rd.
Yeah, so
March 5th.
then
Make sure.
we
Sorry,
talked about
3-5.
at the last TRICOM meeting that in order for the school department to know whether or not they're going to be having to give out some pink slips, that April would be the time to have a vote. I don't think there's enough time between March 4th and April
No.
to deal with the situation and inform the public on what they need to know in order to make an informed decision. And I understand what you're saying, and yes, it is kicking the can down the road. We have found some solution to what turned out to be, or what was originally proposed to be a very large number, and we've been trying to mitigate that the best we can. And I'm not denying the fact that we need to address this long-term at some point in the near future. But I have to say, before I took out papers to run for select board, I did not know that there was a need for an override in this community. I knew what we had done a number of years ago. So here I am, a fairly informed citizen that talks to people and, is here in the community, and I didn't realize what the situation was. When I was going door to door as part of my campaign, there is not an appetite for tax increases, unfortunately. And it came from various sectors of the community in terms of geographically and also demographically. I think I keep using the debt service. Next year would have been the year that the high school debt, which has been steady at a certain rate, would drop down for the first time in 5 years. And it would have been a $100 decrease on our tax bills, approximately for the average homeowner. That's not going to happen for the next 2 years because DPW and library start to kick in. So the same amount that we've been paying for debt service is going to continue for 2 more years. So that means that's been constant and our taxes have still gone up. But it's the subsequent year, it's year 2022, when that DPW and library debt really kicks in, and we're talking about an average of $200 per the average home. And people have homes that are more than that and less than that, I know. But that's a big tax jump. And that's where I'm concerned about this. I also think, given my experience the last time sitting on the school committee and asking for an override, one of the things that the community came together and the select board, finance committee, and school committee agreed to was we needed to address the road improvement in town. We had been kicking that can down the road too many times. And I think the community was able to say, all right, I may not be in favor of the school, but I'm in favor of the roads, or vice versa, or I'm in favor of both, and that did go through. And it was a short period of time, but not as short of the window that we're talking about this year. But I also think the school issue had been, for years, leading up to where we felt we needed that override. There'd been, 2 new school buildings that had come on. We had a population that was growing that needed to be addressed. So there was a lot of information out there. There'd been multiple town meetings that had presentations about the school committee and school population needs and what we needed to do to address those in the community. So as I said, I think there was a higher level of information that people knew about, so that when we did come saying, we've done everything we possibly can to address our school population growth and still need to do this with our staffing, our programming, et cetera. And as I said, when it was paired with the roads, it made the perfect formula, and I think we were very fortunate, and we've been able to utilize that for not just 5 years, but beyond. So I know it's not ideal, but I am concerned, as I said, about the time frame that we would have to do for an override this year. I'd rather start, looking ahead so that we're not waiting until February of next year when we have our budget numbers, but looking ahead to say, okay, what are the projections? What are we going to look at instead of a $68 million? What are we looking at for next year? What's the school committee looking for? Their population growth is kind of leveling off too, from what I've seen in their projections. So that's my concern, is the timing and giving the people the information that they need in order to make an informed decision. I also have a concern about the fire department. I think it's a community effort that people will recognize as a need, that we are one of the final ones in the area that has a part-time,
Call department.
yeah, call department that has been doing this admirably for so many years. But that survey that we did, or the report that we had done, really clearly indicated that we need to have this, and it's going to be at a huge cost. We've known that for decades, that eventually we would have to have full-time staff. So I can see the community getting behind that as part of an override in the future. And then, as I said, the other thing is to cut services. And we haven't had that conversation at all. And I think there are some things that we could do, but they're difficult, and that's what we're not we're trying to avoid that by coming forward with a balanced budget.
What would you cut?
I heard of another town where they cut, they didn't have,
The lifeguards, were you
the
the one talking about
lifeguards.
lifeguards?
The lifeguards.
Yeah.
They had to swim at your own risk, and they cut out, and that's a huge summer cost for us as lifeguards. That would save $200,000 right there.
Okay, but the first time somebody drowns, I'm
Swim
not
at
going
your
to
own risk. I mean, other
Okay.
communities do it too.
be, okay.
You don't have to provide.
None of them are
that.
good, none of them are good, none of
I
them are
know,
good.
that's what I'm saying. And it's utilized, et cetera, so I get it.
But I guess my only response to this, I guess I hadn't been clear enough for the past 5 years. I mean, this is why I didn't want us running around saying that we were in great financial shape, because it was always leading to this point. The math was always leading to this point. And the reason why I wanted to get out in front of it was to tell people, this is coming, this is coming, this is coming. And I know that people don't pay attention all the time, and I know they're hard to reach, and I mentioned that earlier. But, this was always going to come, and to skip to the end of the story, maybe spoiler alert, this is coming again after we pass this next override. So the conversation about how municipal government can maintain cost control in the era of Proposition 2.5, when we're competing with neighboring communities to be able to pay people enough to attract them to these positions is going to be an ongoing conversation. The conversation that we're having with the state about its responsibility to us has just begun. The Beacon Hill thinks that conversation is over. It's not. Back in 2002, we had about 25% of our budget was funded by the state. Now it's around 21%. That 4 or 5% is an extra $3 million off of where we are now,
Don't forget
based on our budget, based on a $70 million budget. If we had that $3 million, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So it's not like we're doing necessarily anything wrong. We're just trying to pay the bills. But the income that we have has gone way down, and we're going to need to address this, sooner rather than later.
Anybody else have anything to add? Doreen?
I just, Becca, would you mind sending the board the recommendations of services that could be cut? The list of terrible
The slide we
choices?
had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
The Excel,
yeah, thank you.
I will say that I was a park ranger, and we did not have guarded swim beaches, and I did respond to 2 fatalities, so.
I'm not saying that I wanted.
No,
to.
I know,
I'm
I
just
know,
saying.
but,
Just options,
I know it's an option, but
We
I
had the
was,
trash
I was the law
conversation,
enforcement
too,
responding to
you know?
fatalities, and it was not fun.
It's a lot of towns that don't supply trash.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of towns don't supply trash, yeah. So, anything else? Does anybody in the audience wish to say something? Come on up to the mic and introduce yourself and your address, please.
Hi, I'm Allison Brissett. I live at, do I have to say where I live? I live at 10 Lakeview Drive in North Grafton. So I just came from the school committee meeting, and I just wanted to say, well, the increase in funding that you guys found for the next fiscal year is great. It's also kind of laughable to only give $200,000 more to the school when they're in such a big deficit, really, to maintain level services. So, that's just my first point, I guess. I just also think that, to echo your point, Peter, I do think you need to give voters a chance at this point to speak their minds and to let the town know whether they support the override or not through a vote. And I know that obviously there's a lot of work that could be done from an informational campaign to get people up to speed so that the override vote could pass. But maybe we should try, right? To just kick the can down the road, I think is irresponsible. I like how you put it, Ed, to say, it's our responsibility as a board to present the vision for the town and to let the town know what the vision could be, and then let the voters vote. And I would also say that when the school committee presented all of the staff cuts recently, that would be projected not just for next year, but the compounding effect that would happen from next year on. was a real eye-opener to many of the people in the town. So while you may be hearing more from people who are against an override, there's a whole contingent of people who are for an override. So I just think that you need to give people a chance to get up to speed, but also to bring the vote to them. So that's all I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Sure, come on up. Oh. Keep in mind, we have no idea what happened upstairs.
Oh, I'm not here to update you on anything at all. Amy Marr, I live at 36 Ferry Street, and I'm a member of the school committee, but I speak for myself. I think we need to put this to the voters. I think the voters need to decide. Jen, you said at TRICOM that you wouldn't stand in the way of putting this in front of the voters. And I would like to see that happen. I believe that we can convince the people of Grafton that we need this override, and we can't do it if we don't have the chance. If we have to wait another year, we're going to be further in debt than we are now, and it's going to be much harder to make that case if we wait another year and then February next year we don't have enough time. That's not really fair. We have time. If we put it on the ballot in May, there's plenty of time to make this case. It is compelling. We're moving 4 positions that we were going to cut this year. Thanks to the insurance money, those 4 positions are saved, but guess what? It's one-time money. They're going to get cut next year. That brings us up to 15 positions next year. Doesn't make it better.
The revenue is not one-time money.
Excuse me?
The revenue is not one-time money.
But the cost saving could be, because we don't know what, we don't
The
know.
cost
We don't know-
saving,
yeah,
right.
well, we never know that anyways.
Right.
No.
So
But we
all
can't
things
count
being
on that.
equal,
Right.
So,
You can't count on any amount.
Correct.
Right? Because there are other fixed costs that could increase and eclipse that number
Sure.
anyways.
but what I'm saying is, it's not gonna solve the problem. It's not even gonna come close to solving the problem. We need an override, and we need it now. Thank you.
I forgot, Amy was helpful this week, and I had asked her specifically what positions the schools lost over the course of the past 3 years. In FY18, they cut a curriculum coordinator, MSES classroom teacher, GHS guidance counselor, and 1.5 preschool teachers. That was FY18. FY19, they cut the Millbury Street Elementary School assistant principal I mentioned before, 2 math specialists, a payroll specialist, and a custodian. On FY20, a quarter teachers moved to grant funding. So now we're working on this coming year. So whatever they come up with upstairs is in addition to these positions already lost. I think that, we want to keep in mind, you don't want a program that's going to have death by 1,000 cuts.
Any other comments?
I have
Lori?
one. Yeah. Going off of what Donna said a few minutes ago, do we have a plan for the fire department? And you had brought up maybe putting that together with the school override. And I'm saying this, knowing we have such a short time frame, is that something that we could do now? I mean, and does the board think we would get additional people who would be in favor of the override if it wasn't the school budget only?
Is that direct question directed to us, Dorian, or to Tim?
Well, we have the plan.
Well,
We laid it
you-
out in
you as
January,
far as-
on January 20th,
Yeah.
about what
Okay.
all the numbers would be.
Yeah.
We'd just take out some of the 6.5 that gave
Right.
people sticker shock just to deal with the fire department and deal with the schools.
Okay.
Yep, so
Or
budget
maybe-
question for Tim, question to the board on whether or not that would be feasible or something we should entertain.
So I'm going to stand by what I said several weeks ago. I think when Becca was here, when she kind of presented some very preliminary numbers, that I do believe the use of cannabis money into our operations, coupled with relying on a grant for public safety, pose some risks. Okay, and I, for one, am in favor of toying with the idea of leaving the 360 in there from cannabis money, and then if that doesn't come in, I would like to see the plans, like how they would come in October and ask the town to
Right.
raise it appropriate, right? But the 130,000, I think, is something that I think we should budget for. And then let's just say this: let's say we budget for that, and we put that in the override. Think about this, and let's say all the chips lined up, and somehow we miraculously, we get it. Then, if we get the grant, okay, then you can shift those monies to some other priority, or maybe potentially save that for next year, or pay off or do something within the capital list that we seem to have that's a mile long. So and that's how I also feel about the cannabis money too. I think I made that very clear on several meetings, that those are really, for the most part, not very sustainable funds to the town, because it fluctuates on the amount of sales that are anticipated. And we know that over time, there will be enough of these establishments within our community, and they're not going to be a really good, reliable source. Temporarily, I think, to your point, like, it helps with the at moment, but I think if you're only looking 2 inches in front of your face, that's fine. But when you look a couple of feet or even further down the road, what's the plan, right? So I would like to see the fire department have a fully funded chief. I think I also speak on behalf of the Fire Study Committee. They made that very unanimous, that they would also like to see that position funded. But we all respect and understand, you know, it's up to town administrator to figure out how to make that work. But they want to see, they'd rather see an assurance versus something that's based on a possibility, I guess, so.
Madam Chair, through you, that 130,000 you're referencing is for the fire chief next year.
Yes.
Correct. But isn't the long-term plan to add other staff?
Yes.
So this
Yeah.
is why it wouldn't be just one year. It would be, there was a plan to add all kinds of staff over the course of several years. So that's why I'm saying it would be something that could be paired with.
Right. And Madam Chair, just to add on to that, that was sort of my point is, you know, Donna had said when she was campaigning, there wasn't much of an appetite for an override. So how do we build that appetite? And does it make sense to add on, you know, with the school budget, something like the fire department? That was my point.
Yeah. I think I
Yeah.
justified that.
I would just say, if we're talking about public safety, the police department has been asking for increases for a long time. So if we're talking about maybe not just do fire department, but public safety, and add the detective and the dispatchers that Tim had laid out. So again, this is all stuff we need to talk about, but, and we do need a fire truck in 2023.
24, right? The ladder truck? Something like that, you're right.
And that's on the capital list?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if we didn't have the $1.2 million to pay for it, I would ask you to exclude that.
Justin has a question.
Oh, first Donna, and then I'll get out there.
I guess I'd go back to what you presented to TRICON, which was included fire, included what you had said, $6.5 million for, was that for both, or was
It was
that
for
just for the
everything.
town? Yeah, okay, so that was for everything.
A robust capital plan,
Yeah.
school department.
I'd say let's look at those to see where the priorities are, where the combination is, or where we have influence to get something passed. We never got an electronic copy of that. All I got was a
Yeah,
hard
I didn't
copy
either.
of it. So I'd like to have that, so we have it
Yeah.
again.
It's on the web.
website.
It's on the website.
Oh,
We
is
can
it?
send it to you.
I
All
can
right.
send it to everyone.
That'd be great.
Speaking of copies, I'm sorry, I want to just tell you another, can you send us a copy of those proposed, of the budget cuts that you went through that Excel spreadsheet earlier? Or do we have a copy of that already?
Doreen just said
Mm-hmm.
for it.
I'll
I
send it
thought
to
she
you.
asked for something different, I'm sorry.
The proposed,
No,
well,
she
are
asked
you
for the
talking about
seven, she asked for the
PowerPoint?
7 lever items that,
Right.
you know, that would be cut.
Yes,
But I'm
for the
talking about
PowerPoint.
the other spreadsheet with the line items that had the reductions in them for
Yeah,
like the building
yeah.
inspector and
Mm-hmm.
all that sort of thing. Right.
They've already been cut.
Come on up.
I just want that copy, yeah.
Bill Hanley, Brigham Hill Road. Question I have is, you gave the school department an additional 230,000, and then earlier tonight you showed where cuts are going to be made. Is that final or is that just preliminary?
Those are just,
500 and so much. How much?
Those are the
Those are-
reductions we took off the budget after it was requested by department heads to make the budget balance.
So that's extra money now?
No, it's money I never had, so. they
Oh, it's
made a
money you
request-
never had.
They made a
Okay.
request in excess of $3 million. You only have 2.1 million in which to work.
Yep.
So I had to make that $600,000
Okay.
reduction to
Okay.
balance the
I
budget.
thought that was an extra
No,
500,000
sir.
that was in the budget that you,
It
okay.
was a request, and we reduced it to make it balance.
You've already done that, okay.
yeah,
All right, great, thank you.
thanks. Come on up.
Hello, Justin Wood, 5 Garden Street. So, few points. First off, to Donna's point about that we just don't have the time to go over for this override to convince the taxpayers of the town. I honestly feel that there is, from my conversations, a lot of people who feel very strongly about level services for the schools, and they're already in support of doing an override for that. And I feel like if we can get the ball rolling and vote in an override to to the polls and get the support of the select board to vote on supporting level services for the schools in supporting the override as a board, just saying that, yes, you support it. Then we have a lot of leverage to actually go out to the community, talk to everybody, and try to get the town on board for that. Now, people that are in favor of it may not convince everyone, but that's something we'll find out at the polls. The second point I have is that, while I completely agree that we need the fire staff, I completely agree that we want to have, if we're doing public safety type things, we should also have more for the police, dispatcher, all that. But the motivation for doing an override at this point is primarily to maintain level services. So I think if we're looking to do an override to add anything, that should be, if possible, a separate poll item on the ballot. So we don't have the situation that people will vote no to support level services just because we're doing level services here, but then adding services over here. It doesn't feel very balanced there.
All right, but we just have to get our terminology straight, because to me, level services is no adding, and on the school side, they are adding, so that level service, so
What are they adding?
there's what, 7 new positions?
Yeah,
Again,
there's 3, there's a couple mandated positions and there's 3 not
Before-
mandated to
Yeah.
total.
again, I don't want to dive into their
$228,000.
budget without,
Certainly, but I don't consider mandated positions that we have to fill in order to be accredited by the state something that we're really adding. Yes, we have to add a new head count for that. And to your point earlier, Jen, about that over the last bunch of years, we've added this many people to the school department. Number one, I don't consider the mandated positions as adding. And the other piece is, I don't know if your numbers are including attrition, so people that have left and then we're filling the role, or are we adding new roles in your numbers there? And that I can investigate and find out, but I've had numerous cases that have businesses say, oh, we've added an extra 100 people over the last year, but really we've also lost or let go in different ways 150. So really ending up with a lower number than we started with, but they talk about it as we added.
I took that right out of the school budget book, so you
No.
can look online, and
Like,
they
I
break it
will be
out.
looking into that. I just have,
Yeah, they break it out very year by year. They tell you exactly what was added and what was taken away. It's all very easy to read, and
I'm not questioning the numbers you got. I just
no,
don't
I'm just saying,
you know,
yeah, you can go and look, but
Certainly.
yeah.
But yeah, I do feel very strongly that this week, or ideally, or even to the point where we can do it this week, or as soon as possible, I would like to see the select board vote on adding it to the ballot and vote their support for an override.
Okay,
Thank you.
Anybody have anything to say? Any other questions in the audience? Chantel?
Hi, Chantel Kimball, 5 Bigelow Way. I'm actually sitting there just a little bit surprised at the suggestion that putting an override in front of the voters is potentially being off the table at this point. I feel like we've been talking about it for so long that it kind of seemed like it was more of a how are we going to get it done than is it actually going to be put forward to the voters. I too am concerned about the short timeline. I remember sitting in TRICOM meetings over a year ago, maybe even closer to 2 years ago, where that group specifically said, if we think we're going to need an override in 2020, we need to start planning for it now. And I think one of the biggest tasks in front of the town, and one of the biggest tasks for all of you and all of us as voters, is how do we keep planning ahead instead of constantly living lean and having to have these gut check reactive approaches to everything. And here we are again, having a reactive approach to how are we going to fund our school, and not really giving anyone, to use maybe an overused word, what they deserve, whether it's proposing salary caps or cutting a foreign language at the high school. I don't know if that's on the table. I'm completely speaking out of school, but all of those kinds of things, cutting lifeguards, kind of, it ends up in the long run not gaining us anything to live so cheap. And it can actually be quite costly. And I think we've heard a lot of examples of where the gap between what we're doing and what we really need to do just keeps getting bigger. So, I mean, I'm here to work. I'm in favor of making sure that at least the question gets in front of the people. And if they don't support it, they don't support it. It is what it is. We kind of have to move forward. But you know, I'm kind of over it. I'm kind of over as lean as we've been living, and I really hope that we're not now taking that off of the table.
Yeah, and I don't think we were. I think that,
You're trying to figure out what the number is.
yeah,
right?
we're trying to figure out, and again, we
Yeah.
haven't met with school committee. There's a lot, you know,
Well, my understanding from Donna was that she was kind of like, yeah, there's not an appetite for an increase, so I'm not really interested in putting. So maybe I misunderstood how that was presented, but that was sort of how it came across. So
it's hard to make a decision when we don't have all the information. And right at this tonight, we don't have all the information. We need to meet with school committee and figure out how their meeting went upstairs, because they're doing work, we're doing work, and then we'll come together and have a good discussion.
I get that, but I feel like we've been talking about this for so long that I feel like we have enough information to know it's needed. We may not know
Right.
the exact dollar figure of how much, but we know we need it. So that's all.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Sure,
Just to-
sure.
Again, say that, so if you know that you're gonna do an override, but you don't know the dollar amount yet, it would be helpful, and as Justin said, it would be helpful for us to know that it may be on the May ballot then, and we just don't know what the number is, so that people can get on, like, be on the ground and start organizing and start to build coalitions of people who would be in support of the override. And I would just say that based on what I heard from the school committee, I mean, it's the time is now, right? And I don't want to see my children go to school at Grafton next year with the cuts that are being proposed at the schools. Like, their whole trajectory for their education. My children are in first grade right now, and then my son's going to be in kindergarten next year. So we're talking about budget impacts that's going to happen, like, affect their whole educational trajectory at the schools. And so I do think you're underestimating the number of people who would be supportive of the override, and to fully fund and fully the town, the select board should put on the ballot a number that's going to meet what the school requested. And the school should be adequately funded at the amount they requested.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just want to state that I will not be an obstacle. I was just expressing what I had observed in my past few months and just putting that information out there. I also agree, just as you said at TRICOM, that we should be putting this to the people and let them vote on it.
Yeah. That hasn't changed. I think that when the health insurance came back at a much better rate, and we were able to give the school department more money, and they met upstairs. I see Laura came in, I know Amy's here. We don't know what happened upstairs, so at that point, you know, we hear things that may or may not, we don't know until it's official. So the school committee met. I'm sure they have a recommendation for us, and we will talk about it and move forward. I mean,
Madam Chair,
yes.
perhaps we should look at it this way. Do we want to kind of work backwards from a date that when we want to ideally make that decision? And I know things could be fluid with the budget because we still don't know what state numbers are going to come in at, and we understand that. But to be sensitive with everyone's timing and just, you know, I think, you know, it does fall on this board to ultimately decide. Perhaps put that on the agenda item for the March 5th TRICOM meeting. And as a result, once we have a discussion, we can take a binding vote saying whether we, you know, support it or not at that meeting. What the actual figure is, I think may have to adjust. But I think what the public is looking for, whether they're for or against it, is what the hell are we doing? So I want to afford that opportunity with that meeting.
Sure.
I figure with finance committee there too, and with the school board, I think you got the three major players. And I know it falls directly on us. It has nothing to do with the school committee or finance committee, but that might be a good meeting to perhaps potentially kick off that decision.
And going back to what Justin had offered, I also think it is important for us to decide whether or not we are putting them on as separate, because we did have this discussion the last time and the Board of Selectmen had to decide. Are you pairing these together and having them go up or down either way? Are you putting them separate or not? And it was decided to pair them, but I'm not saying that that has to be the course of action this time, but same thing, just to what you said, we need to know what we're putting in front of people. So we need to know what that number is. We need to know whether or not we are going to add something other than fire to this by looking at what the town needs, because the town has been taking the same level of cuts over the course of these years too. We haven't been able to necessarily accommodate everything that we want to provide the rest of the community services. So the school is very important. Everybody will agree to that. I've lived it, I've learned it, and I know the values of our property, et cetera. I mean, there's all of the reasons why. But we also have to figure out what it is that we're asking for and then go out and advocate for it.
Well, I think we also have to discuss the capital piece because
Yes.
it was presented and, you know, we have to have that discussion too if we think that has value, if we want to include it at at the 1 million, or maybe it's a different number, or, I mean, all of these things are things we will discuss.
And bear in mind too, you know, we're sort of focusing on the school side of this too, but bring it back. The numbers don't care how we divide up services in this town, whether it's municipal or school. 80% of our budget is service oriented, and when you have people like we just had in this audience that we want to retain, getting 10% raises, 7% raises, even 6% raises, everything above 2.5%, 2.9%, 3% is going to take away from how long you can sustain level services in this community, because our income is limited. So it's not just schools. It's, you know, we want to reward people on the municipal side too. And, you know, Tim has done a good job of cost savings over the years in making the municipal side of the budget more or less level. But there have been cuts, and those cuts have gone to retaining our key employees. I don't think we can keep doing that anymore. I don't think there's much left that he can cut. And for us to be able to, you know, give clerks and rec department and assessors the sort of raises that they deserve in order to keep them here. So it's not just schools. It's, you know, the entire community infrastructure is really struggling with how we maintain this good thing that we have.
Anybody have anything else in the audience?
I just want to, in terms of boiling this down, the concerns from the board relative to the 360 for the marijuana money, the 130 for the grant, obviously it's easy math, 490, 600,000 is, you know, with the 230 added, there's still 600 in the mix, 590 if you do proper math. For the school department to be funded at their request of 2.1, so you're at $1,090,000. So I mean, in terms of a baseline parameter of just to do those three basic things, deal with marijuana not coming in. If it comes in, you don't levy to the max, which you talked about. If you don't get the grant, you'll need that. You'll need to levy to that. So if you wanted to talk about if that's the baseline, we know what $1 million of levy costs the average taxpayer. It's $151. So in terms of boiling it down to be digestible and understood, that's the baseline. If you want more than that, 2 million, you need $352. So it's just, we can make it simple for folks to understand of what those impacts are. But at a baseline for us to talk intelligently, it sounds like 360, 130, and 600 at $1.1 million or $1,090,000 is the number that you might coalesce around when you go to move forward for a May ballot if you move that way.
That would be for 1 year.
It would, but that increases the levy by that $1,090,000. So that's always in there. You only grow by 2.5% plus new growth on that money, but you'll always have that in the base.
All right. Anybody else?
Laura?
Oh, I didn't see. Should come on in.
Guys, we were just about to leave, and now you're all getting...
I'm not going to be long. Laura Often, 79 Old Westboro Road. I came in late, but I heard kind of we don't know what's going on upstairs. I'm happy to give a quick update. live. I know, I wished we had a little TV that I could watch what was going on down here, but that would have been not productive on my end. So we haven't changed our position. We are appreciative of the extra money. That helps us reduce a little less this year. But we're still going to need to be making reductions in our current staff. And we are still in hopes, I was the one to bring it up, we are still supporting and hoping for an override. And we're looking forward to our TRICOM committee meeting on the 5th to further discuss. And if you do have questions about what we're adding or what you think was added in the past, you're more than welcome to reach out and we're happy to discuss it in the meantime. But
Thank you.
so that's where we are moving forward.
That's
So
very
thank you.
helpful.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Anybody else? Did I? All right.
Nope.
Meeting minutes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I motion that the select board approve the joint meeting minutes with school committee on January 14th, 2020 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I motion that the select board approve meeting minutes dated January 21st, 2020 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
you.
thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Good night.